It's 8 o'clock. This is the UK Tonight. Coming up, easier than buying paracetamol. A senior police officer's damning assessment of buying knives as the government launches another clampdown. Among the measures, tougher prison sentences for selling bladed weapons to under 18s and retailers being forced to report suspicious bulk purchases of knives that could then be sold on via social media. But is that all really enough? Well, tonight I'll be joined by Mark Prince, whose son Kyan was stabbed to death almost 20 years ago. And Mark has been campaigning against knife crime ever since. We'll hear if he thinks this will really make a difference. Also ahead, the sinkhole emergency deepens in Surrey, with reports that some properties are now at risk. The sinkhole appeared on Godstone High Street on Monday night with a 100-metre cordon in place. Residents evacuated from 30 homes don't know when they'll be allowed back. We'll have the latest live from the village. Plus, Emma Raducanu thanks fans for their support after she was targeted by a man showing what officials have called fixated behaviour, leaving her in tears during a match in Dubai. And I'll be speaking to the organisers of a 10K run in Glasgow that was targeted by pranksters, sending runners on a 1.5 mile detour. All that to come and more here on the UK Tonight. Good evening, I'm Matt Barbet. There is only one place we can start this evening, the astonishing war of words that has broken out between the presidents of the US and Ukraine. Donald Trump has described Volodymyr Zelenskyy as a dictator who's doing a terrible job in a social media post where he warned he may soon not have a country left. This came hours after President Zelenskyy suggested Mr. Trump was living in a disinformation space after the US leader repeated Russian claims about the start of the war in Ukraine. Well, this is what President Trump said on Truth Social this afternoon. A dictator without elections, Zelenskyy better move fast or he is not going to have a country left. In the meantime, we're successfully negotiating an end to the war with Russia, something all admit only Trump and the Trump administration can do. Biden never tried, he continued. Europe has failed to bring peace, and Zelenskyy probably wants to keep the gravy train going, Donald Trump said. I love Ukraine, but Zelenskyy has done a terrible job. His country is shattered and millions have unnecessarily died. And so it continues. We'll get the UK perspective in a moment. But first, let's go to Washington and our US correspondent, James Matthews. James, you could have imagined those words being spoken about President Trump to describe Vladimir Putin, but he's doing it to someone who everyone else thinks is the good guy.
Yeah, and, speak to some people, they would say the things that Trump has been saying and posting in the past 24 hours, that's a script that could have been written by Putin himself, and that is the worry. It's why, Matt, I've just been to Capitol Hill, spent some time trying to get a sense of the view in a place where politics is done here and policy traditionally, typically, is made. J.D. Vance, the vice president, he was meeting Republican senators, essentially to brief them on where he is and where the president's thinking is. Vance, going into that meeting, he gave an interview to the Daily Mail. He said this, very much reinforcing that sense of denigrating Ukraine. Speaking about Zelenskyy, he said the idea that he's going to change the president's mind by bad-mouthing him in public. Everyone who knows the president will tell you that's an atrocious way to deal with this administration. So further distance between the United States and Ukraine. I think that line that you read out, Trump's Truth Social post, that will worry them in European capitals on a number of levels. In particular, that line, essentially that Europe has failed to bring peace, he said, almost looking backwards at an effort by European leaders to bring peace. Only Trump can do it, and clearly he thinks that that can only be done under his philosophy, a philosophy which I have to say, does permeate through the Republican ranks. We spoke to one or two, and that thinking of Donald Trump, which alarms them in European capitals because it is so aligned with what Moscow has said about Ukraine going back years, alarms them in European capitals, but there is a resonance with Republicans. Listen to Lindsey Graham. I spoke to him about half an hour ago. This is what he had to say.
There's one person that Putin really is afraid of, and that's Trump. And if you ever get a good deal on Ukraine, it'll be because Trump created a sense of dread by Russia. There will be no deal without Ukraine being consulted and on board, because it won't work. I talked to Zelenskyy today. Nobody is going to do anything that you're not involved with.
There you go, Matt. A reassurance of sorts. Lindsey Graham talking about Trump creating a sense of dread for Vladimir Putin. I suppose the counter-argument to that is that the only sense of dread right now is in Ukraine and in other European capitals, certainly not in Moscow. Emmanuel Macron is due out here next week, as of course is the UK Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer. They will speak with Trump, clearly a critical meeting in terms of a way forward, but extremely difficult, because you have to wonder where they find a common starting point with Donald Trump, who for the past 24 hours has been fact-checked beyond all credibility, certainly fact-checked beyond where Starmer and Macron are on the Ukraine conflict.
Thank you, James. Well, let's find out now how this affects the UK's position. The former UK ambassador to Belarus, Nigel Gould-Davis, joins me now. Nigel, thanks very much. Good to see you. Where does this leave the UK then?
It leaves it in the very difficult position of having to try to reconcile the UK's own long-standing views and commitments with regard to Ukraine, which are Europe-wide commitments, with a now fundamentally different perspective that's been set out in blunt and crude terms by the American president. And this will be a test like no other of Prime Minister Starmer's aspirations for the UK to serve as a sort of transatlantic bridge between the United States and the continent. So that's a fine ambition to have, and there's certain signs that President Trump is more willing to listen to our Prime Minister than most other European leaders. This will set an early test of that determination to serve as some of the glue of the now increasingly fraying transatlantic alliance.
But privately, do you think diplomats in Whitehall and in embassies like the one you used to work in around Europe will be shaking their heads at this?
Yes, in dismay and disbelief. We really have had, in the last hour or two, something like the collapse of the relationship between President Trump and President Zelenskyy. And so Trump is one of those leaders, even more than others, for whom the personal is the political. And if he takes against another individual, particularly another leader, it's very difficult to see how that can come back. But the private head shaking and dismay will actually be quite widely shared in the United States as well, I think. And when I look at the body language, for example, of those whom President Trump has sent to negotiate with Russia, people like Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State, and Mike Waltz, the National Security Advisor, they, of course, have to comply with Trump's wishes, but they know better than the sorts of things we've been hearing from Trump this evening. I think they are very unhappy implementers of this erratic and increasingly unpredictable will. They'll be doing their best to quietly restrain some of these worst impulses, so the likes of the UK and other partners will have allies, I think, around Trump, trying to influence, again, constrain, bring him back from these wild outbursts and their dangerous consequences. So it's less the UK, as it were, or even Ukraine versus the US. This is more about everyone else and that narrow sort of coterie around Trump.
Nigel, up to now, the British support through Boris Johnson, Rishi Sunak, Keir Starmer latterly as well, and others as well, has been unwavering. Do you think British politicians now have to make their peace with the fact that Ukraine is going to effectively end up being the loser in all this?
No, I don't think anyone accepts that conclusion at all. If you look at the underlying power sort of potential in terms of economic strength and population, Europe together is vastly more powerful than Russia. We have something like 10 times the economic size, the GDP, and around 4 times the population of Russia, not Europe collectively. Therefore, if Europe really is to mobilize its strength, it can outcompete Russia. The problem is we have underinvested for a decade in our strength. We need to turn that potential into capacity very, very quickly.
But we've had 3 years as a continent, putting aside EU and Brexit, but we've had 3 years as a continent to get our act together, and there hasn't been the appetite. It's Russia that does have the appetite.
You're right. And we should be doing the things now that weren't done and ought to have when the war started, in terms in particular of reigniting, reactivating our defense industrial capacity. We've been relying, frankly, on the Americans for too long. Maybe this is the moment where Europe realizes it's more likely than not to be on its own, and it finally takes the difficult but necessary decisions to take ultimate responsibility for its own defence.
Final question to you, Nigel. The Prime Minister is off to Washington in the coming days. We understand he has a good relationship so far with Donald Trump. David Lammy has a good relationship with J.D. Vance, the Vice President. Do you think he's sitting now in a key seat in that he can be a spokesperson for Europe, that Donald Trump may actually listen to what the British Prime Minister has to say?
I think that has to be the hope and the aspiration. And for all of the, again, splintering this transatlantic alliance, we still have and see warm references to senior UK politicians from the White House and Trump himself. And for the moment, at least, the UK seems to have Trump's ear. That is an indispensable opportunity, not only for the UK, but for European and Ukrainian security.
Nigel Gould-Davis, good to talk to you again. Thanks for joining us here on the UK Tonight.
Thank you.
Next, the government is introducing new restrictions in another attempt to crack down on knife crime that continues to blight the UK. As a police review warns, it's now easier for young people to get hold of blades than it is to buy paracetamol. Retailers will have to report bulk or suspicious sales of knives to the police, and jail sentences for selling weapons to children will be upped. The measures will be known as Ronan's Law, in memory of 16-year-old Ronan Kanda, who was stabbed to death in Wolverhampton in a case of mistaken identity. Our national correspondent, Tom Parminter, has this.
His bench stands where Ronan once played.
Say something. I'm Ronan.
And it's in his name that the law is changing. Because it is far too easy for teenage killers like his to buy a machete and a sword online.
These measures was taken years ago. I believe my son would have been here. My last breath is dedicated to Ronan. And I will continue to fight for my son and to make sure that whatever's gone wrong is corrected.
The government's crackdown will see tougher prison sentences for anyone selling knives to under 18s. And a new offence of possessing an offensive weapon with intent for violence.
How you doing? Good. Put your bag up here then. We have a duty to protect all of the young people that are here, and so I don't want anything past that barrier that I think could be used as a weapon.
In the 3 years since Ronan's murder, there's been further senseless killings in Wolverhampton. At this youth centre, creating a safe space has never been more important.
It's scary for us, it's scary for parents. I would love to see the government looking more at how they intervene early with young people so that they don't get to the point that Ronan's perpetrators got to.
It matters because you have children living with the threat of knife crime every day.
Feels like, honestly, terrifying, because I should be walking around feeling safe, feeling happy, not be feeling scared that I might just get stabbed any second now.
There's kids collecting knives, thinking it's cool, buying even from the littlest of pocket knives to the biggest of zombie knives. And like, I've seen once online on a TikTok video, someone with a full-on samurai sword. Like, knives are hobbies for kids nowadays. It's really crazy how the world and England just got like this.
Retailers will now have to report the bulk buying of knives, which could then be sold on social media. The clampdown cannot come soon enough for parents across the UK.
Do I feel safe to let them out on the street? Definitely not. This is the only place they're allowed to come. They're not allowed to walk the streets until the government can improve knife crime statistics, because what's the alternative? Might some be another name on the news that's had a stabbing? Not a chance.
Nobody should be living with this fear. And while enforcing stricter rules is a start, there is much more work to do. Tom Parmenter, Sky News, Wolverhampton.
Well, to say there's much more work to do is an understatement, especially when it comes to my next guest. I'm joined in the studio by Mark Prince, whose 15-year-old son, Kyan, was stabbed to death in 2006 while trying to break up a fight in school. Mark, we were just talking. I can't believe it's nearly 20 years.
Shocking.
But I also can't believe you've been campaigning for that whole time, and here we are, still talking about it. How does that make you feel?
I was just saying to you, what was that film called? And just remembered it was Groundhog Day. That's what I feel like. Whenever I'm coming to do the media work, it feels like Groundhog Day. I'm just speaking the same thing. The kids are giving us information. They're telling us what needs to happen. We're delivering on that, giving the kids opportunities. They want more sports. They want more mental health support at school. They want more activities. They want more employment opportunities. We're doing all of that. But it's like, I'm telling the government, I'm telling the people that need to put things in place and action that, guys, we need a 10-year plan, a public health model that reaches the nation so we can start getting this work out.
I know you will have an awful lot of empathy with Ronan Kanda's mum. She's campaigning now.
Listen, I've got nothing but credit for them. They lost their son in 2022. I know exactly how they're feeling and what they're going through. But I've been in this now for 18 years. I've got a lot of experience in the front line, the public health, the public first research that we've done, evidences exactly. We've gone and spoken to 1,000 young people, got their voices. So it's showing that it's the cause we need to focus on.
Not the symptoms.
Not the symptoms.
Not knife bans, not making it harder.
Knife bans, harsher policing, none of that. That's all symptomatic. We need to start dealing with the root causes. And those are the things that are talking about kids that are fearful in their area.
Because it's fear that makes them pick up a
lot of times there's that. Then there's money issues. There's kids that are drawn in because of the draw of money to try to earn money. So they get called into that. There's kids that are vulnerable. They might have autism, ADHD. They get drawn into this kind of behaviour because the kids see that there's a vulnerable kid, we can get them involved in it. You know, there's so many different layers to this, how children get drawn into this kind of youth violence. If we're not listening to the children and addressing it, we're always going to be going round, we stopped, we banned this, we done that, but it's not tackling the issue.
Because we call it knife crime. There it is on our screen. We're calling it knife crime. But it's what you're saying, it's not really about the knives. It's about the reasons why children are fearful, why they're in poverty, why they're turning to crime, why the other boy who killed Kyan took it was only a penknife he used, wasn't it? Why he took that to school.
Yeah, a camping knife.
So it's not really knife crime, it's a much bigger, deeper problem that we're not looking at. Is that what you think?
That's exactly what I'm saying, and that's what I have been saying. That's why it's Groundhog Day.
Yeah.
Because I'm in here saying the same thing again. And why is it, how does it suit the people that can change the rules and allow these bans in, which on one hand are good, but on another hand, does it suit you to give us a tick box to say, well, we're seen to be doing something, but we're not actually addressing the root causes? We're just allowing this ban to go through because it will make us look like we're doing something about it.
Not addressing it, why? Because it takes too long, because it's too expensive, we don't have the money. What do you think is the reason?
Look, I'll be honest with you. you can't care about the future of young people if you haven't shown that you care. They need to show and demonstrate they care about the future of young people in this country. And it hasn't been shown. You said you cared about people when this virus came in, and you put all these measures in straight away, stopped people's lives, stopped them from going out. How come the same attitude and mindset isn't going when our children are dying on the streets, blood on the streets of our kids? There's something wrong going up here with our children, and we need to be there to help and support them. It's not punitive measures. It is support and help. That's what we need to be doing.
I was looking back before we came on air at videos of Cayenne, at the artist who created an adult likeness of Cayenne. He was people may not know that he was a really promising footballer, was playing for QPR. He was then put in that FIFA game as a QPR footballer. Incredible stuff. When you talk to young people, when they realise the impact of Cayenne dying has had on you, and we've been able to see through all these measures, all these things, what he most likely would have become. Does that hit home with young people? Do they realise the gravity of this?
Okay, let me really nail this. I don't really use that to help them to make it hit home. They need someone that's going to touch their heart and minds to help them to see their own life. They can't see what the damage they've done to mine and my family and all these people. They need to see what damage they're doing to themselves and their own future. So when I get them to understand their value and that they have purpose, number one, they're not used to hearing that message. They're not used to hearing how awesome that they are and how valuable, and they've got a gift that they're supposed to give to the world. And once their ears are pricked up to that, and then we get to show them that going this route won't get you there. Going this route does. Changing your mindset, thinking successful, believing in yourself, and then beginning to break down all the belief systems that they have, that they're not worthy, that they're only good for making criminal money and getting involved in gangs. And we show them a better route where they can still become successful, still earn money, still make their families proud. A lot of these kids are good kids. And once we do that and we begin to work with them and connect from a heart level, we start seeing the response, and it's a beautiful transformation.
Mark, it's great to have you here. It's great to hear you talking about this. I know it's not what you wanted to do 19 years ago, and you'd do anything to change it, but hearing you talk, it's hard not to be persuaded. Thank you so much.
We need that help because we're still doing the work. If the government's not going to make changes, we need the public to help us to make it. Let's make it happen.
Appreciate being here.
Beautiful. Thank you so much.
We have some breaking news now, and Downing Street says Sir Keir Starmer has spoken to Volodymyr Zelenskyy tonight after Donald Trump accused him of being a dictator. Number 10 says the Prime Minister expressed his support for President Zelenskyy as Ukraine's democratically elected leader and said that it was perfectly reasonable to suspend elections during wartime, as has happened. Our chief political correspondent, John Craig, joins me now from Westminster. John, tell us more about this.
This is a very public show of support for President Zelenskyy in the face of the attacks, the increasingly loud attacks and vitriolic attacks on him by President Trump, the latest in which he's called him a dictator. So the number 10 have just revealed in the last few minutes that the Prime Minister and President Zelenskyy have spoken on the phone and stressed the need for everyone to work together, In other words, the Europeans being involved in the peace process as well, such as it is. Now, that key sentence, the Prime Minister expressed his support for President Zelenskyy as Ukraine's democratically elected leader, not a dictator, as President Trump said he was earlier on this evening. Said it was perfectly reasonable to suspend elections during wartime, as the UK did during World War II. President Trump complained that there hadn't been elections, and that was why he was calling Zelenskyy a dictator. Then the PM said, according to Number 10, the Prime Minister reiterated his support for the US-led efforts to get a lasting peace in Ukraine that deterred Russia from any future aggression. So, although otherwise a deal that lasts and that Russia doesn't come back with a further invasion. Remember, the Prime Minister spoke on Monday evening after those talks, those crisis talks in Paris, about the need for the Americans to provide what he called a backstop to support any troops that might go into Ukraine. British troops, he said he was considering putting troops on the ground in Ukraine, but he talked about a backstop. So, very public support from our Prime Minister here in the UK for President Zelenskyy. Not exactly a slapdown for President Trump, but a firm reaffirmation of the UK position, backing President Zelenskyy in the face of those attacks by President Trump.
John, thank you very much indeed. Still to come here on the UK Tonight, the sinkhole emergency deepens in Surrey, with reports that some homes are now at risk. We'll be live in Godstone next.
Paris reverberated to the sights, sounds and smells of conflict.
There's a focal point to all this anger, and that is Emmanuel Macron.
I'm Adam Parsons, Sky's Europe correspondent based here in Brussels.
There are dozens of people desperately clambering to get onto that boat. It is a chaotic scene, but it's being watched by dozens of French police officers on the beach.
I've reported on migration across Europe, close up on the ground, understanding that sense of desperation and meeting the criminal gangs behind it.
This old fishing boat set off from the Libyan port of Tobruk. There were 606 people who were on board.
So we've been distributing life jackets to all the people on board this boat, and now the first person is coming on board.
This is the ugly side of Italian football.
In Italy, everything is really organized.
Football's problems with hooliganism, racism were just dormant, and now they're back and they're getting worse.
We cover so many countries, languages and cultures and work hard to gain trust to bring you the full story first.
Help is slowly reaching these places.
It's not just homes, but whole streets like this one that have been reduced to rubble and dust.
This is a picture of destruction.
Everywhere you look in this mountaintop community, there is absolute devastation.
These are the settlers in waiting, keen to start a new life, to annex Gaza for Israel.
The least we can do is just kick them out of our land.
Gaza, which is just 2 miles in that direction, is under attack again. Getting the chance to tell people's stories, it's a privilege.
I saw police being forceful, pushing young men and women to the ground as they made almost 100 arrests. Will the cold affect your voters?
Well, we have a lot of tremendous support.
Free wherever you get your news.
The people here know that worse storms may well be on their way.
I'm Martha Kellner and I'm Sky's US correspondent based here in Los Angeles.
Now to an update on a story we first brought you this time last night. There are reports that some properties in the village of Godstone in Surrey are now under threat after that huge sinkhole appeared on the high street. A major incident has now been declared, with homes evacuated and people urged to avoid the area. Sky's Shaman Freeman-Powell has the latest.
A sinkhole in the middle of a sleepy Surrey village, swallowing up the road, forcing businesses to close and residents to move elsewhere. The gaping void first appeared on Monday, continuing to grow in size, and is now thought to be at least 20 metres, the length of 2 double-decker buses. Those who live here are shocked by the sight, but not surprised.
You get so many heavy lorries come down here during the week. You know, they're 30, 40 tonne things. It was a disaster waiting to happen, I think, to be honest.
There's lots of speculation about what caused the cavity. Caves lie beneath, and heavy vehicles carrying goods over time could have worn down the surface. After the road opened up, though, a water pipe burst, leaving those living directly above without access to power or water. It's been almost 2 days since some residents here were woken up in the early hours and told that they'd better leave. 30 properties were evacuated, but residents have no idea when they may return home. Later in the evening, residents met up, hoping for an opportunity to ask local leaders the important questions. But when they arrived, the doors were shut and no one was there to give them answers.
We're okay.
Frustrating for residents like Nush, whose home could soon be consumed.
I don't feel like it's ever going to be safe for me to go back into it. Honestly, when you look out, that's kind of where my children's bedrooms are, and it just doesn't feel safe anymore.
Surrey police have warned residents to avoid the area, and the county council has declared a major incident.
We were just asking people to avoid the area just because there are a lot of crews on site at the moment from not only Surrey Highways but all the utilities and the technicians as well. As soon as we can declare the sites as safe and stable, we will let residents know.
Authorities remain on site assessing the damage and ensuring the safety of the area, whilst residents are set to meet to discuss the sudden disruption that's emerging beneath them. Siobhan Freeman-Powell, Sky News, Godstone in Surrey.
Well, Siobhan is still in Godstone for us this evening. Hi, Siobhan. I think this resonates with a lot of people because it just feels unbelievable. It can suddenly, a big hole could appear and it feels like it could happen to any of us. But what's the latest there?
Well, the latest is that residents earlier had hoped to try and find some of these answers out. They want to know how long they're likely to be evacuated for and whether or not there will be any financial support. However, when they arrived at the community centre earlier on, they were met with a closed door, essentially. The community centre was shut and the residents, around 30 of them, were left outside to talk among themselves. Eventually, a local councillor did arrive, but only to tell those residents that the meeting was actually yesterday. Now, around 30 people were there. Many of those are the people that have been evacuated from this area. Some of them left their properties in the dead of night with small children, told that they should leave immediately. But they are very, very concerned. There are rumours circulating that some of the homes may need to be demolished, but there are no answers. There's no certainty. And when residents say they're trying to seek these answers out, they are being confronted with more confusion. As it stands, this road is closed. It is a very busy road. It's very close to the M25. It often has quite large vehicles carrying heavy goods. Some of the residents say that they believe that could be part of the reason why we're seeing the huge sinkhole, the pictures that we've been looking at throughout the course of today. Residents say that for years now, they have been complaining that when these large vehicles drive up and down this road, their house shakes. But as I say, when they arrived at that community meeting earlier on, they weren't able to get many answers. Some of them, though, were sent a statement. This is a statement from Tanbridge District Council. It does speak to a potential cause or part of a cause of this sinkhole. It says that they are setting up community centres from tomorrow, and the statement reads that they understands that there were historical sandpits in the area and that their building control team has visited the site to establish whether the homes are structurally sound. But the last sentence of this statement says further investigations are ongoing. So as it stands, many residents have no idea how long they may be evacuated for or whether, if any help will be available.
Yeah, that's terrible for them, isn't it, Siobhan? Thank you very much indeed for the update. Still to come here on the UK Tonight, Emma Raducanu thanks her fans for their support after she was targeted by a man in Dubai who was showing what officials have called fixated behaviour. We'll hear from a tennis writer on that next. And inflation takes off yet again, driven by unusually high airfares, amongst other things. We'll take a look at what it means for you in your pocket. Welcome back. British tennis player Emma Raducanu has thanked her fans for their support after what she described as a difficult experience at the Dubai Tennis Championships yesterday. The 22-year-old was reportedly approached by a man displaying what was described as fixated behaviour at the tournament before the same person appeared in the first few rows of her second-round match against Karolina Muchova. Raducanu was left visibly upset and approached the umpire's chair during the match. The man was subsequently removed from the court by security and has now been banned from all Women's Tennis Association events. Well, let's have a word with tennis writer Molly McElwee, who joins me now. She hosts Off the Bench, the women's sport podcast. Molly, good to see you. Let's address this first, because it's not the first time Emma Raducanu has had an issue like this. We'll come on to that in a second, but this in particular, you can see why it was upsetting for her.
Oh, 100%. It was really difficult scenes out in Dubai to see this come to the fore on the court. It's quite rare. And she was right to feel distressed for someone who had previously approached her on Monday, the day before her match. And clearly it had been a difficult encounter then for her to see him when she was on the court. It caused her a lot of distress. You could see her opponent, Karolina Muchova, had to console her. This was also only a few minutes into her match. So the fact she was able to finish her match and make it competitive, she lost 7-6, 6-4, is quite remarkable considering how upset she clearly was at the beginning of it.
And she has previously had a stalker as well, hasn't she? And she said about that, she was always looking over her shoulder, which makes you realise how nervous she would have been in this situation.
Oh, 100%. I mean, you mentioned her previous experience with a stalker back in 2022. He was given a 5-year restraining order. He showed up at her home on 3 separate occasions. He stole things from her parents' home, and she was made to feel uncomfortable in her own home. So now for her to be on a tennis court where she should feel safe, should feel able to compete, it's her place of work. She was made to feel unsafe. And I think her experience is one that is shared by a lot of other female athletes. The difference with this situation was that it happened when she was on the field of play, which is quite rare.
Yes. Look, I'm sure plenty of people remember way back when Monica Seles was attacked on court as well. I think someone stabbed her in the shoulder. That was when she was sat on a break during a match. It makes you wonder if the security around the players, is it good enough now? Could it be improved? The authorities doing the best they can?
I mean, you mentioned that example back in 1993, which I think shook tennis completely. Security is a lot tighter now than it would have been then. The reality is that tennis is a sport where the fans are quite close to the action. It's one of the great parts of the sport. I think as a fan going to these events, you're able to feel part of the action, and the security just needs to be there to make the players feel safe. I mean, the WTA have been putting in measures over the last few years to ensure that players feel more and more safe. There's safeguarding initiatives they've put in. There's more hoops that people have to jump through to get credentials, which players have access to. And more than that too, they've also got mental health support for players so that they feel safe too. But those initiatives, I guess, have limitations as we saw this week, because Raducanu still felt unsafe in that situation. The good thing was the WTA and the tournament moved very quickly to remove him from the premises, and he's been banned for life. And those are all good signs. It's just really upsetting and disappointing, I guess, that Emma Raducanu had to go through that very difficult experience.
Yes, certainly is. Molly, thanks for joining us. Appreciate that. Now, the father of a British journalist who is missing in Brazil has told Sky News that her disappearance is very worrying and he is very concerned. 32-year-old Charlotte Pete was last heard from on the 8th of February in Sao Paulo. Family and friends say she was working as a freelance foreign correspondent and planned to go to Rio de Janeiro before she disappeared. The Association of Foreign Press Correspondents in Brazil has called on local authorities to intensify their search, and the UK Foreign Office says they are supporting miss Pete's family. The government is warning of a bumpy road ahead after new figures showed inflation rose to its highest level in almost a year last month. The rate hit 3%, driven by higher food prices, airfares and non-alcoholic beverage costs, amongst other things. Our business and economics correspondent Gurpreet Narwan explains.
Inflation, it's back on an unpredictable path, with food, airfares and VAT on private schools driving the measure higher. And parents at this stay-and-play cafe in Harrogate are worried.
The mortgage is up for renewal next year and it's just, everything's so expensive, isn't it? So it is a worry. Obviously with the 2 children, they're very expensive.
Some more pain from them.
My 2 younger children are going to have a very different experience than my older children because we used to be able to take them out on days out. We can't do that with the younger 2.
Hannah, the owner here, hasn't paid herself a wage for the last 18 months.
The only way that we can survive is obviously by putting the prices up, but then it puts the customers off coming and, well, they can't afford to come. So, yeah, it's a bit of a catch-22 situation.
But inflation will climb even higher. It's expected to hit 3.7% later this year because of higher energy prices. Policymakers, however, are sanguine. Right now, they are more worried about weak growth. The Bank of England is confident that inflation will eventually come back down to target. It means that policymakers will continue cutting interest rates this year, even as the headline rate of inflation rises. They're going to have to hold their nerve. If the last few years have taught us anything, it's that inflation can be an unpredictable beast. And if it stays high while growth stalls, well, that's not a place the Chancellor wants to be. Businesses say she's not helping the cause by ramping up employers' national insurance contributions.
We're talking about 1.2 million for Wetherspoon a week. A week? Yes, it's a lot, and it's more for pubs and hospitality than for supermarkets because we've got more labour costs per pint.
Wetherspoon's pre-tax profits jumped to £74 million last year, but smaller businesses are less well insulated.
Beef has gone up ×4 over the last 15 years.
Paul Kendall runs Kendall's Farm Butchers in Pateley Bridge.
I feel now you have to just be careful with how you're going to expand. I've thought about doing a deli and expanding the range, but just at the moment I'm sitting on my hands and just seeing how this plays out. So instead of going for the growth, more protection of what we've got.
High inflation might end up being a bump in the road, but businesses and customers fear it will be a long journey back to brighter economic prospects. Gurpreet Narwan, Sky News.
Yeah, things are still pricey, aren't they? Still to come here on the UK Tonight. How a prank at a 10K race in Glasgow led to runners taking rather a lengthy detour they didn't want. And in the sport, difficulties for Man United on and off the pitch as they publish their latest financial results.
Sunday, the Premier League is exclusively on Peacock. The league's most dynamic scorers square off. Goal for Haaland! Erling Haaland and Man City. Fantastic goal! Mo Salah and Liverpool. Time after time, here's Liverpool shining lights. This is the Premier League. That's just stunning! Sunday, only on Peacock.
I'm Martha Kellner and I'm Sky's US correspondent based here in Los Angeles. Sky News, the full story first.
I'm Martin Brunt and I'm Sky's crime correspondent.
I'm David Blevins and I'm Sky's senior Ireland correspondent. I've spent 30 years reporting the journey from conflict to peace.
Free wherever you get your news. I'm Neville Lazarus and I'm Sky's reporter based in Delhi.
We're trying to see as much as we can.
We start with breaking news.
I am Anna Botting.
It's been quite some day.
The golden age of America begins right now.
A long
long-awaited ceasefire is now underway.
First question, Sky News.
Congratulations, this is a huge moment.
Describe this feeling, it's incredible.
Now to California.
The Democratic mayor of Los Angeles cut the fire department budget.
Do you owe citizens an apology? Have you nothing to say today?
Jane Secker, Sky News. Would you like to respond to us now?
I've never seen anything like this.
Beth Rigby, Sky News.
In principle, would you agree to do that?
Criticism of you, the president, is banned. How is this a fair election?
Historic day here today.
The cameras are poised here, there, everywhere, waiting to see what the president might do next.
I gave you the A+ treatment. Thank you. Thank you all.
Our app gives you the very best of Sky News wherever you are. Breaking news, videos and analysis.
Evidence of the crisis.
Podcasts, watching us live.
I'm live in Jerusalem.
Wherever you get your podcast.
All in one place and all at just the touch of a screen. The Sky News app. Get the full story first.
Welcome back. Coming up, why competitors at a 10K race in Glasgow were left running quite a bit further than they anticipated. They're not laughing, by the way. But before that, Chris is here with the sport. Chris, been a difficult season for Man United.
Yep.
On the pitch, but off the pitch as well, it seems, because they've just published their financial results. Not brilliant.
Not brilliant. I mean, the fans of United can't seem to catch a break at the moment. Wherever they turn, it seems to be bad news. So they've just published today their latest quarterly results, so the final quarter of 2024. And it makes for pretty difficult reading for fans of the club. So the figures show that it cost Manchester United £14.5 million combined to sack Erik ten Hag, pay off him and his backroom staff, and also get rid of their sporting director, Dan Ashworth. So we'll get on to Dan Ashworth shortly. But those payments contributed to United making a loss of £27.7 million in that period. That's just a 3-month period we're talking about. Coupled with the fact that when they failed to qualify for the Champions League last year, they had a huge loss in broadcast revenue, 42%, down from, I think, 27 million down to about 3 million in terms of profit there. So it's all starting to cut quite deep. They had to make £18.5 million in interest payments. This is interest payments. It doesn't service anything apart from their debt, which now stands at a whopping £1 billion. Now, that's dry. That's the numbers. We've dealt with the numbers. But this Friday will be the anniversary of Ineos and Sir Jim Ratcliffe coming in and riding to the rescue on their big white horse. But I don't know if that could be the case. To be fair to them, they've injected good money, £280 million into the club. But their decision-making will come under the microscope when you factor in the Ten Hag decision to give him a new contract just last summer was their decision. They sacked him 4 months later. The hiring of Dan Ashworth as a sporting director from Newcastle, their decision. They sacked him 4 months later. If you factor in the compensation paid to Newcastle and then his severance pay, it all contributes to these bad numbers. And the fact that they're 15th in the Premier League, ultimately, they are not going to be in the Champions League again next year.
Well, we were talking about bumps in the road for the economy, certainly bumps in the road for United as well. What does it mean for them looking ahead?
Well, they want to build a new stadium, and that's £1 billion. If you look at Tottenham, 800 million. If you look at Everton, and it seems a long way off. Big financial decisions are needed. Let's have a look at the rest of the sport this evening. Plenty of football going on.
Staying connected is vital for business. Sky Business sponsors this report.
You got more chance to win the lottery than making it as a professional footballer.
Player now, they have much more responsibility.
I've heard all the stories. Anecdotes from old friends.
I think your responsibility is to guide them in the same direction as I went myself.
The route to the very top.
Everyone would like to be a footballer, but there's only a certain few of us that are lucky enough to go and be that.
Young people devastated once they've been released.
I'm forever searching for Matthew.
I've seen how the academies work.
Success is reaching your full potential.
From different areas of the pyramid.
Thank you to everyone at Exeter for all you've done for me.
It's clear this country is producing good players. But are we giving them the whole package? I want to help. I decided to get some more advice on education. This is Bryanston School in Dorset. Richard Jones is the headmaster here and has some big ideas that could work in football. Even Premier League clubs visit here, looking at...
Sky Business sponsors this report.
Sorry, forgot to be impartial with that football result, or that goal going in. Anyway, excuse me. Competitors now at a 10k race in Glasgow were left running further than they anticipated on Sunday after a prankster sent runners on quite a lengthy detour. The organisers, Acorn Trail, said someone pretended to be a marshal and pointed runners in the wrong direction after burying signs that were meant to be marking the course. Around 30 people ended up running the extended route. Let's take a look at it. This was the route that the runners should have been taking, quite a simple trail, out and back across the park. But some of the runners actually ended up doing, well, this, a route 2.5 kilometres longer and in totally the wrong direction. The founders of Acorn Trails and the organisers of the 10K, Alex Osborne and Michelle Sinsheimer, join me now. It's good to see you. I'm sure at first glance, a lot of people thought this was a bit of a lark, a bit funny. And I know you recognise that, but you don't see it the same way, do you?
That's correct. Like you say, a lot of the runners came across and a lot of the publicity we've had has been about being a prank and making it sound a bit funny. But the more it's gone on, the more we've looked at it and the more we think the potential of it being beyond a prank is quite an issue. The fine line between it being a prank and people going left instead of right, and people being left out or misaligned into the park away from things that the support network that they could have needed, the warm clothing and things like that, the refreshments and first aid if they needed it. That's the fine line that could have been crossed. Unfortunately, was not.
I'm guessing, Michelle, that's because you had runners of all abilities. Some people trying to do their first 10K, maybe, which is a pretty arduous task. You don't really want to add on another 2.5 at the end of that, do you?
No, and the route that we had put on was actually quite a tricky technical route as well. So I would imagine by 10K they were ready to finish. So
yeah. Any sense who it was who did this and why they might have done it?
No, it's a bit of a mystery, really. Some of our runners reported that an older female had pointed them in the wrong direction, but really that's all we have. That's all the information we have.
So what's happening now? Are police investigating? What's going on with that?
No, I think that's a step too far. Without any actual issue actually resolving from it, like if someone had been injured, had something occurred, like that would have been the outcome of it. But obviously, fortunately, no one was injured or no one was stuck down there, so there's no police involvement at all.
Well, look, that is a small mercy. We're seeing some of the pictures of the runners now. Given that it didn't massively inconvenience people, they weren't hurt, are people starting to see the funny side? Are they thinking they'll come back and do the proper 10K? Are you going to run it again? What are people's reactions to it, Alex?
I think with quite a lot of the runners that were involved and adversely affected by it were quite happy. They weren't happy, but they'll come back again. We've got another race next month, a different event, but in a similar park on the 16th of March. So quite a lot of them are saying they're happy to come back. They accept that it's not our fault as organisers. They realise that other outside bodies have got involved and changed things rather than it being a fault of the organisers.
Well, look, I'm sure plenty of the runners will be glad you're coming back doing it bigger, well, maybe not longer, but certainly bigger and better next time. And just make sure you nail down those arrows good and proper so people can't meddle with them or hide them or anything like that.
Indeed, we'll try our best to make sure the course markings are more secure.
All right, glad we came with a bit of a smile. Alex, Michelle, thank you both very much indeed, and good luck with the next one.
Thank you very much.
OK, let's have a quick look at the weather now. In the next few days are going to be much milder, pretty warm actually, with strong wind and bands of rain spreading from the southwest. It's going to be windy this evening too, with gales around some western and northeastern coasts, and heavy rain moving out of Ireland into Northern Ireland and much of southwestern Britain. Most places will see rain spreading from the west tonight, locally heavy, but southeast England looks mainly dry, while other eastern parts will largely dry up later. That's all from the UK tonight. You can catch up on all the highlights on our webpage as well. The QR code on your screen right now. Up next, with the world, it's Yalda. I'll see you tomorrow at 8.
I saw police being forceful, pushing young men and women to the ground as they made almost 100 arrests. Will the cold affect your voters?
Well, we have a lot of tremendous support.
Free, wherever you get your news. The people here know that worse storms may well be on their way. I'm Martha Kellner and I'm Sky's US correspondent based here in Los Angeles.